My father looked at me across that conference table like I was a clerical mistake someone had forgotten to correct. "She has no standing here," he said, not to me, to the attorney sitting across from him. "Her name appears on some old paperwork from my first marriage." That's it. That's the extent of it. My stepmother nodded without looking up from her phone. I sat with my hands folded on the table and said nothing. I had gotten very good at saying nothing. I should back up. My mother died when I was 9. Ovarian cancer, diagnosed in February, gone by October. I remember the speed of it more than anything. How one spring she was braiding my hair before school, and by fall I was wearing a black dress that was too big for me and standing in a cemetery in Spokane, while strangers patted my head and said things about heaven. My father remarried 14 months later. I was still sleeping with my mother's cardigan folded under my pillow. He brought my stepmother, Patrice, to Sunday dinner and introduced her as a very special friend, and I knew from the way he said it that the matter had already been decided. Patrice had 2 kids from her first marriage, a son, Brendan, 2 years older than me, a daughter, Cassidy, 1 year younger. Within 8 months, the 4 of them had absorbed into a unit that moved through the house like water, and I was the rock that water moved around. I don't want to tell the story like Patrice was cruel. She wasn't exactly. She remembered my birthday. She drove me to orthodontist appointments. She did the things that were required of her, and she did them efficiently, and she never once, not in 9 years of living under the same roof, called me by a nickname or touched my shoulder or asked me what I was thinking about. I learned to be small. I learned to take up as little space as possible. I ate quickly and cleared my plate and disappeared to my room, and I think everyone in that house was quietly grateful for it. I left for college at 17 on a partial scholarship to the University of Washington, and I did not go home for Thanksgiving that year. I told my father I had a study group. I sat in my dorm room eating a turkey sandwich from the dining hall, and I felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't known was tight. I called my mother's sister, my Aunt Cecile, instead. She was the one who told me when I was 12 that my mother had set up a small trust before she died. "She wanted to make sure you had something," Cecile had said quietly, like it was a secret. She did it herself before things got too bad. She was very deliberate about it. I didn't understand what a trust was at 12. By the time I did, I'd learned to hold it close, like a stone in my pocket, something solid and private that belonged only to me. I joined the Army at 22, 6 months after I graduated. I'd done ROTC all 4 years, and I commissioned as a second lieutenant in the military intelligence branch. I found, to my own surprise, that the structure suited something in me, the clarity of it, the chain of accountability, the fact that your value was legible. You performed or you didn't. There was no reading between the lines. I was good at it. I deployed twice. I made first lieutenant, then captain. I was selected for a broadening assignment that took me to DC for 2 years, where I worked on a joint task force I'm still not entirely at liberty to describe. I was promoted to major at 29, which was early enough that my battalion commander mentioned it in front of the assembled unit. I did not call my father to tell him any of this. He called me, occasionally. Birthday calls that lasted 4 minutes. Calls when there was news. Brendan's wedding, Cassidy's new baby, his own retirement from the insurance company where he'd worked for 30 years. I listened. I said the right things. I asked appropriate follow-up questions. I had become, somewhere along the way, very skilled at performing the role of daughter, in a way that required nothing real from either of us. The call about his health came from Patrice, not from him. She left a voicemail in February of last year, her voice measured and deliberate in the way that meant she'd rehearsed it. He'd been diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's. He was stable. They were making adjustments. She was letting me know as a courtesy. I thanked her for calling when I called back. I asked if there was anything they needed. She said no. We hung up after 6 minutes. I went back to work. The call about my mother's trust came from a number I didn't recognize. Area code 59, Spokane. The man on the other end introduced himself as Mr. Whitmore, an estate attorney. He explained that he had administered my mother's trust for the past 22 years, that the terms specified distribution upon my 30th birthday, or upon my independent financial establishment, whichever came first, and that he had been attempting to reach me through my father's address for some time. My father's address, I said. Yes. The contact information we had on file routed correspondence through your father's household. I sat with that for a moment. I haven't lived there since I was 17. I understand. We were not aware of that. Your father indicated on several occasions that he would pass along the information. I understood then that my father had received letters about my mother's trust, letters meant for me, and had said nothing. For years, maybe more than a decade, I kept my voice level. I asked Mr. Whitmore to send everything to my current address. He did. The trust was not enormous. My mother had been a school librarian and she hadn't had much to leave, but it was hers, and it was mine, and it had been sitting in accounts, growing quietly, while my father collected the mail and said nothing. I should have let it go. I know that. Every practical part of me said to take the distribution, close the matter, and move forward. But Aunt Cecile called me the same week. She'd been trying to get in touch with me too. She told me that Patrice had contacted her 6 months earlier, asking questions about the trust, whether it was still active, who the beneficiary was, whether there was any flexibility in the terms. She wanted to know if it could be redirected, Cecile said. Her voice was very quiet. I told her it had nothing to do with it. I don't. But I thought you should know someone was asking. I sat in my car in the parking garage of my office building for a long time after that call. Then I called Mr. Whitmore back and told him I'd like to meet in person. What I learned over the course of several weeks and several conversations with Mr. Whitmore and a second attorney I retained on my own behalf was this: my father had not attempted to redirect the trust. He couldn't. My mother had structured it carefully, specifically with her attorney's guidance, to prevent exactly that. But he had intercepted the correspondence. He had told Mr. Caraments, Whitmore's office, on at least 3 occasions, that I was not currently reachable and that he would handle it on her behalf. He had positioned himself for years as a gatekeeper to something my mother had intended for me alone. My own attorney, a woman named Ms. Abernethy, who had the manner of someone who had heard every possible version of family dysfunction and found it all equally unsurprising, reviewed the correspondence and told me I had grounds to file a complaint with the state bar and potentially pursue a civil matter. The trust itself is intact, she said. The question is whether you want to address the interference. I told her I wanted to think about it. I thought about it for 3 weeks. I thought about the 9-year-old in the too big black dress. I thought about Patrice's voicemail, the one that had referred to me as a courtesy. I thought about my father looking across Sunday dinners for all those years and never once asking what I wanted to do with my life. I told Ms. Abernethy I wanted to proceed. The meeting was my father's idea, actually. When he received notice that I had initiated a formal inquiry regarding the trust correspondence, he called me directly for the first time in 8 months. His voice was different, slower, slightly thickened. The Parkinson's, I realized. It was progressing. I think we should talk about this as a family, he said. I think we should, I said. He suggested a mediation, a sit-down with both attorneys present. I agreed. He named a date, I confirmed it, and we hung up. I arrived at the conference room early. I always arrive early. It's a habit the Army instilled so deeply I don't know how to be any other way. My father arrived with Patrice and his attorney, a man named Mr. Gould, who had a practiced way of looking at you like you were already an obstacle he was calculating how to move around. My attorney, Ms. Treesell, Abernethy, sat beside me. She had a yellow legal pad and a pen she didn't use. My father settled into his chair. He looked at me for a moment. Really looked at me. Maybe for the first time in years. And then he looked at his attorney. And then he said it. She has no standing here. Her name appears on some old paperwork from my first marriage. That's it. That's the extent of it. Patrice nodded without looking up from her phone. I sat with my hands folded on the table and said nothing. Mr. Gould opened a folder. Our position is that the trust correspondence was handled in the family's best interest during a period when the beneficiary was unreachable, Miss Abernethy said. She said it pleasantly. Difficult to locate, Mr. Gould said. My client has maintained a permanent address and a military mailing address continuously since the age of 17, Ms. Abernethy said. She also appears for the last 7 years as an officer in the United States Army with a publicly searchable record of service. There was a pause. Mr. Perm. Gould glanced at my father. Something shifted in the room. A small, barely perceptible shift, like a change in air pressure. Your client's service record, Mr. Gould said carefully, isn't particularly relevant to. It's relevant to the question of whether she was findable, Ms. Abernethy said. She was findable. She was very findable. Anyone who wanted to locate her had multiple avenues to do so. The question isn't whether she was reachable. The question is whether anyone tried. My father was very still. She's my daughter, he said. He said it slowly, like he was testing the word. I was looking out for her interests. I spoke for the first time. You told Mr. Whitmore's office on 3 separate occasions that I was not reachable, I said. You received at minimum 6 pieces of correspondence intended for me and did not forward them. My mother set up that trust in the last months of her life. She did it deliberately. She did it specifically. She made sure it was protected. I paused. From a lot of things. It turns out she was thorough. He looked at me. I looked back. I don't want anything from you, I said. I never did. I want what she left me. That's all I came here for. There was a long silence. Mr. Gould leaned over and said something quiet to my father. My father's jaw moved. He looked down at the table. Patrice had put her phone away. She was watching me now with an expression I couldn't entirely read. Not quite guilt, not quite recognition. Something between the two. The trust distribution is not in dispute, Mr. Gould said finally. Our concern was simply, we're prepared to receive the distribution as structured, Ms. Half. Abernethy said, and to consider the matter of the intercepted correspondence separately at our client's discretion. She looked at me. I nodded. We'll be in touch regarding that timeline. She closed her legal pad. The meeting, such as it was effectively over. I sat in Ms. Raw, was effectively over. I sat in Ms. Raw, Abernethy's car in the parking lot afterward because she had offered to drive me and I had said yes without quite knowing why. The afternoon was gray, the kind of Pacific Northwest gray that sits on everything. You did well in there, she said. I didn't do very much, I said. You stayed calm, she said. In my experience, that's the hardest thing. I looked out the window. Somewhere in that building, my father was probably still sitting at that table, his attorney talking quietly beside him, Patrice gathering her things. I thought about what his face had looked like when he said she has no standing here. The certainty of it, the ease. I thought about my mother in the last months of her life, sitting across from an attorney in some office I'd never seen, making sure I would have something, making sure, even from wherever she was going, that I would be okay. She had been 31 when she was diagnosed. I was 30 now. We were nearly the same age, in some strange, sidelong way I'd never thought about until that moment. Can I ask you something? I said. Miss Abernethy waited. Is this going to be over? Like, will it be done? She thought about it honestly, which I appreciated. The distribution will be done, yes. The other matter depends on what you decide. There's no obligation to pursue it. She paused. But I want you to understand something. What your mother did. Structuring that trust the way she did. Naming you specifically. Protecting it the way she protected it. She made it very difficult for anyone to take it from you. She did that on purpose. I nodded. Whatever you decide to do next, she said, that part is already finished. She already won that. I'm not going to tell you everything resolved into something clean. It didn't. My father sent me a text message 3 weeks later. 4 sentences. He said he was sorry I felt that the correspondence hadn't reached me as quickly as it should have. He said he had always wanted the best for me. He said he hoped I understood that everything he had done had come from a place of caring. He said he hoped we could move forward. I read it twice. Then I set my phone face down on my kitchen counter and made a cup of coffee and stood at my window for a long time. I didn't respond. I'm still deciding whether I will. The distribution came through in April, processed cleanly, deposited into an account I set up specifically for it. The money sits there. I look at the balance sometimes and think about my mother's hands, the way they moved when she braided my hair, the patience of it. The way she would hum quietly to herself, something tuneless, just to fill the silence. She knew she was leaving me. She knew what she was leaving me in. And she sat down in that attorney's office, 31 years old and running out of time, and she built me something solid. I have a meeting next month with a financial advisor. I'm going to invest most of it, something long-term, something that compounds, the kind of thing that gets more valuable with time. My mother would have liked that, I think. She was always very deliberate about things.